I'm joined here in Berlin by Anna Bjerde. She's the managing director of the World Bank. Anna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Anna, around the world, we're facing many crises: inflation, higher interest rates, a war in Ukraine. The World Bank itself says that the global economy is on a precarious footing. Are we heading towards a global recession?
Well, I think you captured it very well. We have so many multiple challenges that are facing the world today and I don't think we've been in a situation where we've had crisis after crisis and the cumulative impact of it for a very long time. And I think we're monitoring it so closely, and forecasting is very difficult, especially in the short term. But what we see is that it takes multiple actions by multiple countries at the same time to make sure that we can get the world economy to grow again and to grow sustainably. So it's really about collective action on a set of measures to really avoid that we end up in a recession. For the time being, we still project growth, but it is not high growth, it's low growth, and it's probably low growth for some time to come.
Speaking of financial pressures, higher interest rates mean more debt pressures, especially in developing economies. 70 countries around the world are actually right now at risk of not being able to repay their debt and defaulting on their debt. How can the international financial system help prevent debt defaults of developing countries?
So this is one of the major challenges that really worries us, because what we saw is that lots of countries had to take on more debt to get through these crises, and now with the higher interest rates, it's becoming much more difficult for them. So what we need to do is make sure, first and foremost, that when debt is taken on, we think about that medium and longer term, and that also we do, and this is what the World Bank tries to help do, look at public expenditure and efficiency to make sure that the undertaking of that is for projects that have return for good development outcomes. So just thinking through that process, I think, is important. Secondly, of course, we work with all governments around the country to see how they can manage their budgets at a time when a lot of it is going to repay debt, but it's also going to things like unforeseen occasions of climate change and disasters. So everything else gets squeezed, including investments in human development and other pressing priority needs. So I think it's really about making sure that we do good, proper economic planning, and for countries that are close to debt distress or in debt distress, that we come together as a community to see how we can help them through it.
And how can concretely the international community help a country that's facing debt distress acutely, that doesn't have this time to plan ahead anymore?
Well, there's many mechanisms. Of course, there's the common framework, which the World Bank supports because it's a organized, more medium-term framework for making sure that countries that are falling into these difficult situations, and when they do get into debt distress, there's a mechanism for resolving it. For the poorest countries in the world, what we do is we make sure that we use our mechanisms, including IDA, to when they do get into debt distress, we make sure we mobilize our grants so that we're not piling on more debt on the countries that are in distress.
Since 2017, China has become the world's biggest lender. It's actually a bigger lender than the IMF, the World Bank, and the Paris Club combined now around the globe. Does that mean the World Bank is actually becoming irrelevant?
So I don't think the World Bank is becoming irrelevant, and I actually think, if anything, the evolution process that we've been undertaking since actually last October or so is exactly trying to do that, which is, in this changing world with new crises, new challenges, how do you make sure an institution like the World Bank maintains relevance, but really actually steps up the game? So what we're trying to do is understand better all these challenges, see how we can be better fit for fight, which actually introduces what we call the new playbook. And this new playbook is for us to take on a greater mandate that reflects the challenges in the world, make sure we have the financial capacity to be present and responsive, and make sure our operating model, which is how we support projects and development, is much more nimble and much more effective. So we're working on all these fronts, and we're really looking forward to now. We have our annual meeting starting in about a week's time, and we'll be discussing all of this. But lots of work has been done over the last year. And this is all about maintaining that relevance, and most and foremost, helping countries around the world that are in such dire need of help.
Right, so to be more relevant, the World Bank needs more cash, but at a time when government budgets are squeezed, is that a realistic goal?
So we definitely need more money, and we also need to be better at what we do. Because what we have found over these last few years is that these crises and the world's challenges cannot be addressed doing business as usual. So we're really trying to become a better bank as well as a bigger bank. Now, of course, countries around the world are feeling the squeeze. It's been a very tough years for every country around the world, which is why what we're trying to do is offer innovative financing schemes that leverage. By that I mean contributions to the World Bank by countries who want to help developing countries through the World Bank. We're trying to make sure that all the contributions that come through the World Bank are leveraged, that we actually maximize the impact we can have with the money. So it's a market mechanism whereby, for $1, you can maybe have $4 through the market mechanism, or $6, or even $8. And we think that leveraging is key at a time when there's a squeeze, really, on fiscal buffers around the world and on available financing.
Right, but back to concrete finances. Does the World Bank expect to get more money from countries around the world?
So we've already undertaken a number of measures to essentially make sure that we have more financing capacity. And I'm sure you're familiar with the capital adequacy framework, and we, like other multilateral development institutions, have been going through these recommendations to see which ones can the World Bank best address. And we have already found and actually already announced a number of measures that we are taking in order to free up more resources within the World Bank. We're also introducing, as I mentioned, some innovations which will allow us to actually do more. So we have something we call a hybrid capital instrument, which will allow investments into the World Bank that we can then, as I mentioned, leverage, that we can get more to the front line where it needs us. And we also have something we call a guarantee platform, which means we can take on more exposure because there's an underpinning guarantee that allows us to do that. So we believe that we will be able to do more through the measures we have taken. But as I said, we need to focus both on the better part and the bigger part. And on the better part, it's actually a lot of things we also need to do to really organize ourselves according to this new playbook, which will allow us to be more effective in development.
You just said you want to become a better bank. What's one concrete aspect that needs to change, in your opinion, to make the World Bank better?
One. Okay. Yeah. Well, we need to be quicker. So to prepare a project at the World Bank and to implement a project with our clients around the world can take a very long time. And there are many measures we can take to shorten the preparation time of a project for approval to our board. And then there are many things we need to do to also make sure the implementation phase, the time, let's say, between an approval to put more renewable energy into a country to when that energy is flowing into schools, public institutions, for the businesses. So we need to shorten that period because we're actually depriving development from happening when it takes too long. And when I say too long, it can take years. So we're really working to shorten the time frame.
Traditionally, the World Bank's mandate has been to alleviate poverty around the world. Now the World Bank is expanding its mandate to also include aspects like combating climate change. At the same time, last year, the World Bank invested billions of dollars in fossil fuels. Does the World Bank have concrete plans to completely stop funding fossil fuels?
Yes, so we have really pivoted towards renewable energy. And I would say energy efficiency, because sometimes in some countries it's not the access agenda, it's about high energy intensity and it's about reducing that. In other countries, it is an access agenda. And there what we're finding is that the least cost options in most countries around the world is actually renewable. So solar has hugely seen a reduction in cost, and of course also wind. And today I was on a panel, we discussed the power of hydropower, especially in Africa. There's a lot of endowment to develop hydropower, and I think this is also very important because it can be large scale and it's clean.
In the past, the World Bank has used intransparent finance mechanisms like trade finance in order to fund fossil fuels. Can you tell me that the World Bank will stop doing this in the future?
Well, we have a climate change action plan in the World Bank, and we're very committed to what we call eliminating poverty on a livable planet. And that livable planet is all about climate. It's also about global challenges like fragility and pandemics. But we really need to prepare the world for a much cleaner environment, and where the generations that are coming now have a chance to actually live a good life and a decent life. So we need to go for the clean solutions, and there's plenty of them, and the cost curves have gone down. So we really actually see that renewable energy is the way to go to scale up energy.
Anna Bjerde, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you.